we'll go ahead and just, okay, we'll go ahead and get a meeting started here. Looks like on the participant list, we've got all of the board members present here, so I'll dispense with a roll call. And I hope that everyone's had an opportunity to read what was sent out last week on the draft bird hunting regulations. There was one, I think, issue that had people scratching their heads about a little bit earlier, and that was the shooting hours for pheasants. And that was addressed in the comments there in the bird hunting regulation. And so I was wondering if there was any other discussion concerning that draft proposal. Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, we've got a draft proposal in front of us that needs to actually be forwarded to the Fish and Game Commission, and I think they've got a meeting scheduled tomorrow, and that's why we had to arrange this meeting today on a little bit short notice. And so I was wondering if we've got any kind of a motion from the floor to approve that draft bird hunting proposal.
Alan?
Yes.
I had a couple questions that I didn't send prior. I hope that's not a problem.
Oh, no, go ahead. We got time.
I had a question about the unlawful discharge within 150 yards of residence.
Andy, you're kind of breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
okay.
you were looked like you were freezing.
You might try turning your
Okay.
video off, Andy. That might help.
Yeah.
Turn my video off. So I've got a little more, okay, so you don't have to see me talk. There, is that better?
Better. That's much better.
Okay. Okay. My question was about the unlawful discharge within 150 yards of a residence. I know the state has a similar law. I was thinking, and I'd have to check, I was thinking that the state had a modifier to that that included without permission of the resident of a residence. I may be mistaken on that. And the reason I ask is because a lot of our bird hunting sometimes happens within that 150 yards of some residence. And is it absolutely forbidden for anyone to shoot within 150 yards of a residence, whether it's the landowner or the resident himself or herself? Or is that, is there just no modifier to that?
That's a good question. Do we have somebody, Carrie, or anybody that can answer that?
Yeah, I can. So I did have a conversation with that on with our game wardens because we did receive a comment on that from a resident in the Mission Valley that they wanted that it increased because they thought that that was too close to be shooting within their or close to their residence. And so one of their comment was they wanted that increased. And so I chatted with our wardens about that. And what they had told me is that that regulation there comes straight out of, that's the state law there, and that is referencing. And so if the state law has the additional, you know, with, I can't remember how you'd phrase that, but with resident or with landowner permission. So if that's something that is included in that law, then we can definitely add that there. But again, just with the note that there are concerned citizens that think that that is also not enough of a buffer.
Right.
So I do think if we change that this year, we'd probably have to resubmit the draft so that folks could see that, that verbiage in there.
And I'm looking for the state reg, and my apologies for not finding it before. Dylan, would you happen to have an easy access to that?
I don't, I can look, but Lee, I just texted Lee Anderson to see if he could join us. So he should be joining us here any second.
Okay, that was just one of my questions, because
I do
while
think
there are some landowners that wouldn't want it that close to their home, and I'm guessing that would be those whose land is not actually being hunted on, because a landowner could stipulate that any way they wish. You know, don't shoot within such a distance of a house. As far as a law, that would also tie the hands of landowners who did not mind.
Yeah, and I think if I remember reading, because when I was responding to that comment, I did look at the state law, and it does say something about with, you know, no shooting without landowner permission. So if there is permission, I believe that you can shoot within that. But yeah, I just think you need to make sure that you have permission of all residences within 150 yards. The way that I understood that in the state law.
I think Andy brings up a good point here, and you know I've got some Eurasian collared doves here that am trying to get rid of and would welcome anybody to help.
That was one that jumped out at me. The other one that I mentioned, where it talks about watercraft usage. I know the watercraft laws on the res are anything that isn't Flathead Lake and lower Flathead River is no trailer and electric or hand powered. If I remember correctly, I know that sometimes the clarification trailered, non-trailered is that no, it can't arrive at the water body with a trailer. It has to come in the back of a truck or on top of a vehicle. If the trailer doesn't enter the water, I think that's a little bit of a muddy area that, no pun intended, that might be addressed. Because I know there's some on the reservation who utilize some of the smaller lakes where they have a boat of small size. It's hand launchable, but they actually trailer it to the body of water. And I understood that traditionally to be that as long as the trailer never enters the water and it's hand launched, that was not an objection. It's just a little fine point, but it lists specifically kayaks, canoes, rafts, and paddle boards in this draft. And I don't know if that excludes the use of what I'm talking about, hand launchable small John boat with an electric trolling motor, which is one of the things that we see quite a bit being used.
And I'm trying to find where you're referencing that. Is it the next one down, the use of a motor or engine propelled boat, or is there somewhere specifically that it's mentioning kayaks? And
I do not have that pulled up in front of me.
oh, I see. Emergency watercraft regulations down below. Just making sure I know where to put the notes. No, it's not working. Let's see, that says something about kayaks. There we go. Only handheld or only hand propelled or electronic non-trailered watercraft, kayaks, canoes, rafts, and paddleboards are permitted on reservation waters, with the exception of Flathead Lake and Lower Flathead River. And then up above it talks about on the Flathead River and Flathead Lake what motor is allowed. And so your question, and I believe it was Andy, was in reference to whether or not like if you hauled a kayak or a canoe on a trailer but didn't put it in the water with the trailer, whether or not that would be allowable, or was I misunderstanding that?
Just a little bit. Actually,
can I-
still hand launch, trailer never touches the water, trailer never enters the water. And then the wording of kayaks, canoes, rafts, paddle boards, is that all inclusive, nothing beyond those? Or does it still allow the use of a 10-foot John boat with an electric trolling motor that a person either brings in the back of a vehicle or on a small trailer and then hand launches where the trailer never touches the water? I just think that'd be a good clarification, because I know that that is a popular usage right now on some of the smaller bodies of water. It's not a,
Yeah, I was wondering if we could maybe recommend a change there to just hand propelled or electronic, and drop any reference to non-trailer, because I'm a little bit in the same situation. I have a drift boat, a non-powered drift boat, no motor, no electric motor, no gas motor on it, but and I can launch it without touching, without the trailer wheels touching water. Do it all the time, but it's kind of nice to fish out of also.
Let's see, and so are folks using these hand propelled or electronic non-trailered watercraft boats for waterfowl hunting, or is that more for fishing?
Fishing for me, yeah.
Is
I
it
would
used in hunting?
I would say that it is
'Cause m-
being possibly used by some for hunting, for accessing other parts of a small body of water, but it's also fishing. Fishing is probably predominantly more where that's used. What we're seeing, but I just think the non-trailered trailers, when we visited with the wardens before, they've said, if it's hand launched and the trailer isn't touching the water, you're good to go. In other words, it's a small craft. There's no reservoirs for water to be trapped. The trailer itself doesn't enter any invasive species into the water, chunks of seaweed or whatever attached to it. And so that's been our understanding. And I'm wondering if this is the same wording that's also in the fishing regulations. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like the way that it's worded, it probably comes straight out of our regulations. But if it needs clarification, that's something we can
Yeah,
look at for next year for sure.
We've also, I've also have a canoe trailer that hauls multiple canoes, and we've used that. We don't obviously put it in the water or anything close to the water, but we'll have a half a dozen canoes on it sometimes, just to, for an evening of canoeing, like on Mission Dam or McDonald Lake or something like that. And so I don't know if that would prescribe that also, since they were actually hauled near the water with a trailer, even though they're canoes.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like the wardens, someone had mentioned, had explained that rule, as long as the trailer doesn't touch the water, that wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, maybe that is something that needs clarified with the wardens. I'm looking in our regulations right now to see whether or not that language comes from.
I see it on page 12. Carrie, on page 12 of the hunting, fishing, recreation regulations for members 22 through 23 season. On
Okay,
the left-hand side, left-hand column, about a fourth of the way up from the bottom, boat trailers are not permitted to enter Flathead Reservation water bodies with the exception of Flathead Lake and Lower Flathead River. Boat motors other than electric motors not permitted used on any boat, etc. So point 1 and 2 of the subpoint. It'd be J. It'd be paragraph J, subpoint 1 and 2. Other than that, it was a little more specific in the waterfowl regulation, and that's why it raised my question.
Okay. Yeah, I assume that it might just be, they might have got updated in the regulations here, and then that just wasn't reflected in these waterfowl ones, maybe. So I can look into that, and just make sure that it is more streamlined with the verbiage in the reservation guidelines. Or the
That's
recreation guidelines, to look
that's
at point 1 and point 2.
Yes. It just raised a little flag for me when I saw it, and I thought, well, that's a little different, and it's very specific where it excludes when it only is kayaks, canoes, rafts, and paddle boards instead of watercraft as a whole.
Non-trailered watercraft. Oh, okay. So
Yeah, I
the
would
issue
like to-
being with the after non-trailered watercraft, where it says kayaks, canoes, rafts, and paddle boards, that because so there are other forms of non-trailered watercraft that isn't a kayak, canoe, raft, or paddleboard.
Yeah, John boats, drift boats, things like that.
Okay.
You know, John boats can be in the back of a pickup. A drift boat's a little bit harder to put in the back of a pickup.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Depends on how fast you're going, Alan.
How big the winch is.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I can, and it looks like there isn't a closing parentheses on that. So it looks like maybe it had been attempted to be edited and not fully edited in the past. So I can just maybe take out or remove the parenthesis kayak, canoe, raft, and paddleboard. And then it would just say only hand propelled or electronic non-watered watercraft are permitted on reservation waters.
It's not all reservation waters, but specifically the other than the Flathead Lake and the river. And then
Yeah.
But
also,
then it does say after that, with the exception
Yeah.
of the Flathead Lake
There
and
you
Lower
go.
Flathead River.
there you go.
Yeah.
But I was just referencing that first part of the sentence there.
And then also the trailering, on the general regulations or guidelines, it says that trailers are not to enter those waters, which means it could arrive, as Alan says, on a trailer, but then be hand launched without the trailer entering the water itself. Where the other regs in this waterfowl and bird regulations says specifically no trailered watercraft, which would be slightly different than that.
Okay. Yeah, I see that discrepancy there. So I'll just essentially take this A1 and 2 and combine that in kind of in lieu of that last one, because it's saying the same thing, only the wording is a little confusing.
Okay, and Marie Terosian is on with her hand up. So Marie, recognizing you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. This
Okay,
must be Arnie, I'm sorry.
Yes, this is Arnold.
Yeah.
I have a little comment on the subject before about the 150-yard range between from where you can shoot a bird to where your house is. I'm all in favor of that because I live next to some tribal land where people come down to hunt the pheasant a lot, and more than once they've shot towards my house, and I've had the pellets bounce off my garage while I've been in there and off of the roof of my house. And I've actually argued with the bird hunters because they don't know that that's a law. So I'd like to see that stay just for the safety purpose.
I think
don't
that
know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Go ahead.
I think that it should stay 150. It could even be 250 yards, as far as I'm concerned. I think there should be a exclusion within that, though, that says without permission of the resident of the residence, which would mean if you wanted someone to be able to shoot that close, you could give them permission to, or if it was your own property, you could give someone permission to. But as it would stand, as it is right now, without your permission, they could not.
Being that you don't own the land, can you give them permission?
Now, I don't know. That might be a question more for Lee.
So what would be the exact, the circumstances there on that portion? Like they're hunting on somebody else's property?
They are hunting on tribal land.
Oh, on tribal land.
Yes, which I live next to, and they shoot a pheasant, but they discharge their guns towards my house. And they are, I don't know how far the pellets on a shotgun will travel.
Mhm.
But
So,
if I
okay.
give them permission to shoot towards my house, and then they do it, and then there is some damage, I mean, does it fall back on me or?
well, I think a couple things are going there. I don't know that you would have the authority to grant permission on the tribal lands for something unless there was a regulation change. It said something to that effect would be my guess. But as far as them, if somebody were to shoot and actually hit your house, they would potentially have there is a violation that covers that. It's not a hunting violation. It would be some sort of like a disorderly conduct or unsafe discharge of a firearm, which is something that a county sheriff can deal with. It's like we don't have any restrictions from the state for discharge of a firearm as far as it goes near a house, etc., other than on state lands. There's a 1/4 mile restriction. But if somebody were to shoot and they put a bullet through somebody's house or shot shells on it, that's something that would be turned over to the sheriff to deal with on that type of basically a reckless discharge of a firearm. But I don't know how that permission would work on tribal land, if the restrictions on tribal lands, and then you're saying, yeah, go ahead. My guess is, practically speaking, if as an enforcement guy, if somebody wasn't worried about that near their property, we wouldn't be very worried about it either. I think it's kind of like the boat trailer issue. Guys haven't been, practically speaking, if you didn't put those boats in the water, or the trailer, in the water, I don't think anybody's gotten too worried about it, because I'm assuming it's all about the AIS versus just the site size and being able to actually get a trailer in there. Now, mind you, if on that trailer restriction, if there's no trailer there, there's no question as to whether it was in the water or not, from an enforcement standpoint, versus one being there and you'd have to see or watch or figure out if something had been put in the water. That's just a little side note, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, going back to what Arnie was talking about here, I don't think anybody wants to get rid of that 50-yard no discharge or within 50 yards of a residence. But I think what Andy was talking about was unless permitted by the landowner or the resident of the residence there, something similar to that.
150 yards, I think, is what it is, Alan.
Okay,
And that's
150 yards, yeah. I thought it was 50, but okay.
And Leah, thanks for that clarification. I had thought that in years past, we had a certain distance from a inhabited residence, but maybe that's been stricken from state law.
That was, that's still in there on DNRC land, state land. It's, you can't just shoot within a quarter mile of an occupied dwelling without permission from the homeowner. But
That's
just
what I
on
was
state land. Yep.
trying to remember.
Yeah, and this is Dean. I have to just kind of go along with Arnold was talking about. I'm in the exact same boat down here, just south of 95. My property is 10 yards from tribal land that gets hammered. As soon as somebody comes, as soon as somebody hunts it, somebody leaves it, somebody's right behind them.
Dean, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah.
You're really garbled also. Is there maybe you could kill your video and then start all over again if you don't mind?
I thought he was under the Witness Protection Act.
Better? Is that better?
No, that isn't much better, darn it. Huh. You're pretty garbled, but go ahead and try it that way and see if it clears up.
Well, yeah, so I'm in the same boat as Armin. No?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Not that big a deal. I think you guys covered it.
Yeah, you sound like one of those people in those movies about that are testifying in anonymity or something like that under the Witness Protection Program.
You might be able to try, Dean, exiting the meeting and then re-entering. I've seen that work sometimes. And then maybe Lee, could you clarify or describe again? Because you were mentioning something about not being able to shoot within a quarter mile of an occupied dwelling or residence. Is that different from the 150 yards discharging a firearm, or are those, because the
Yes.
distances are different? Okay.
Yeah, that applies to, that's a totally separate regulation that is only specific to state school trust lands.
Okay.
Or on DNRC lands, that they have that restriction. It's not one that's in our hunting regs that applies on private lands or Forest Service or anything. It's just specific to that.
Okay.
Which
Perfect.
it wouldn't apply for this case. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And so then one thought that I have, since there is a bit of discussion on whether or not to include without landowner permission, what if I just leave it the way it is, and then just reference in parentheses the state law that comes from, so that if folks want to go and read and see that without landowner permission stated in that law, because yeah, the warden said that statement right there comes straight out of state law. So what if I just reference that state law in parentheses?
When you are referencing the state law, are you talking about what I just explained, or is there something other than that?
No, that's just the state law allowing the unlawful discharge of firearm within 150 yards of a residence law. Because when I was looking this up a couple of weeks ago, there is a law that says 150 yards. Let me look into that real quick.
And while you're looking into that, Dean's back with us, and so let's give Dean another shot here.
Is this any better?
Oh yeah, much better.
Better.
Okay, well, yeah, it worked. Just clicked out and start over. So I was just going to mention, following along with Arnold, what he had commented. Yeah, I live my house is within 10 yards of some tribal land that gets hunted religiously every day throughout the pheasant season. And this comes up a lot when this law came in, and I was on the board when this law was put in. And I do think there was a statement that unless you had landowner permission, and it wasn't to give permission on the tribal land, but if somebody was to come to my house and hunt the wetland in front of my house, not so much on the tribal land, but they wanted to cross the fence and a pheasant got up within 50 yards, I think that was fine. But it was meant to people pulling up out here on the county road and walking down my fence line. It was meant to forbid some of that. And like I say, the wardens have been here a number of times to address the issue and gone so far as maybe putting up signs at 150 yards because they have to walk right near the fence to get around the wetland and then back into the tribal land or, you know, farther into it to be able to hunt. And a lot of them just don't read the regs, but I do think there was a reason to add that and that was if, like I say, on your own property, if you give your kid permission to hunt within 50 yards of the house, that shouldn't be impacted by this rule. I know the wardens wouldn't, as Lee mentioned, they would, you know, be considerate of that. But I do think, according to state law, where it says on DNRC property, specifically states without landowner permission. So I think we need that little disclaimer in there for a number of reasons. But I want to keep it, I too wouldn't mind if it was 200 or 300 yards without landowner permission. If that all makes sense.
Sounds good.
Carrie, I think just the inclusion of without permission of the resident of the occupant of the residence would completely clear all that up about as quickly as.
Okay. And oh golly, I forgot the name. And does that sound good with everybody if we just put without landowner permission at the end of that sentence?
I think it should be something with permission of the occupant of the residency, because let's say you're on a neighboring piece of property and your house butts up against, how do I say it? Oh, more to the point, let's say it's a rental house and the owner of the property gives you permission to let you shoot within that distance of a house, but the person that's living in the house that's rented from him doesn't. Yeah, so I don't know if that without permission of the occupant of the residency, if that would just make that just a little more clear. I don't know.
Yeah, the one in the state upland game bird regulations that Lee was referring to, that is only, according to him, in reference to state trust land, basically says without permission of the inhabitant.
There. This is what we teach our kids in hunter safety, and that's why it all came up with. And when I was reading it, I thought, well, that's a little different than what we've been teaching our kids. We want to make sure we get it right.
So I don't know, for a matter of kind of order, if you all want to do a motion then on this. Alan, is that?
Yeah, we need to move this forward with whatever recommendations we're making to, this needs to be moved forward to the Fish and Game Commission, who are meeting tomorrow on bird regulations for the state.
I'd move that we adopt the language concerning occupant of the residency from the state regulations, and suggest that it be added to the tribal regulations guidelines as well.
And what about the language for the, I just want to make sure we're clear on the trailerable language.
You want to make that a second or a second issue, or separate point, or?
It's up to you guys. We can do them separately, or we can do them together. And if you want that motion to wait for a second here, I'll just ask for a second on it, Andy.
I'll
So is there a
second.
second? Okay, Dean's, Andy moved and Dean seconded to include the language of occupant of residency. And any more discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, that sounds like it's all been in the affirmative. Arnie, did you
Aye.
vote? You're not on my screen. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And so that takes care of the shooting distance issue. Let's move on to the trailerable issue. And Carrie, what did we, I'm going to look to you, actually, I guess, to see what we decided there for language.
Yeah, so what I am going to do there is just in the updated recreation regulation. So in these recreation regulations, in section, I guess the sections might be different because this is last year's, but the verbiage from boating and water sports, bullet 1 and bullet 2. I'm just going to combine both of those that talk about, and I can just read those. Boat motors other than electric motors are not permitted or used within any boat on all water bodies except Flathead Lake and the lower Flathead River. And then boat trailers are not permitted to enter Flathead Reservation water bodies with the exception of Flathead Lake and lower Flathead River. And so I'll just combine those two into, and then just rewrite that with those two regulations, just to kind of clarify that language.
Okay, thank you.
And remove the kayak, canoe, raft, paddleboard specific language and just leave it as watercraft.
Yeah, none of what's in the regs will be there. It'll just say what I just read, which doesn't mention any specific type of watercraft.
Okay, do we
I
have
make a motion, we go with that.
Okay, Dean moved to accept the language that Carrie has read here on trailerable boats accessing water bodies. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded with that language. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Is there any opposition to that? I didn't see anybody, so. Okay, we'll go ahead. Then I think they'll still need a motion to move these regulations forward, to approve these regulations as with the suggested amendments.
So moved.
Okay, Charles moved to accept the regulations with the aforementioned amendments or changes. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this then? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. And any opposed like sign? I think we were all in the affirmative. Okay, well, that concludes this portion of the meeting. And we received via email from Martha in Kalispell a schedule of meetings for this board. The next one being in, well, there's one scheduled for May 25th, which I will not be able to attend. I can attend sometime prior to May 21st. I can attend. But it doesn't mean that Andy or somebody else can't chair this May 25th meeting. And then the other one that I will probably have some problem with is the October 12th meeting. I'm usually not around here on October 12th. I'll just give Andy a heads up on that since he's vice chair this year.
I can work with that. It's, it comes down to, hunting seasons, Alan. But
Yes.
with our iPhone, we can do that from just about anywhere. So,
Okay.
okay. So,
And if it would be easiest for this board, I could send out with Martha, I guess she could send out a doodle poll, maybe with a couple dates for each of these meetings, if that would be the easiest to try to identify when the most.
That would be good because I think Chuck had some date conflicts also.
Yeah, that sounds good. These dates, essentially as a little background, are pretty much kind of the same-ish timeframes that we would typically meet for our set number of meetings per year as this board. I'll need to check with Carrie to make sure that they all align with their processes. For example, there still might be times like this meeting where we kind of have to call a board meeting to make sure to meet a deadline or some sort of timing. So Carrie and I will definitely work together to make sure that we, as best we can align with her processes, regulation setting, and then obviously our state process is just the same. So there still might be the occasional meeting like this where we kind of do an impromptu one, but these dates are, and then the topics that they cover have essentially been the same ones that we do year after year. So, but not to say that we can't obviously add a topic for discussion. If there's something a board member would like to address, like we have this last year, we can obviously add to that. But the items you see there are just kind of the general topics that we'll for sure cover. And then the other one for this group to kind of maybe bat around some ideas that we can get going in email form is a field trip. Last year, you'll remember we did the great field trip down there at Blue Bay and went out and learned about the native fish keepers. And so thinking of a state field trip, if there's any ideas or interest, please let us know. We can kind of get those ideas going in an email chain as well.
Okay.
Well, very good, I guess, unless anyone has anything else. And I will just to recognize for our recording that I do not see any members of the public logged in. If there were, we would have obviously given them an opportunity to comment on any of our votes today, but do not see any members of the public. But I don't think I don't have anything else to cover today. Carrie, do you have anything else you need to cover?
Nope, I think that is good. I guess, yeah, on the note of scheduling, I see here that, yeah, it looks like sometime in May was when we're slated to bring the pheasant and partridge season regulations and recommendation approval to, forward to the council and the commission. So that the process that we have here is like, if that's a meeting that could happen the first couple weeks of April, that would be good in our timeline, because I can't set the limits in these regulations or update them until the end of February. So we're looking like early March, but then I have to have them submitted for a full 30-day public comment period before I can bring them to our tribal council for approval and this council for approval before they go to the state. And so, and the state brings them in the April commission meeting, which, is happening next or tomorrow. And so if there's a way that we could bump that May meeting up into early April, that would really help the timeline out here and may alleviate us needing to have this extra meeting every year. Because I know that Dale, when he explained this process, said that there was typically like a meeting maybe in March that would happen with this group before our comment period closed. And so he'd always have to re-engage everybody, gather the group after, our public comment period had closed, and then before they went to the state commission board as well. And so maybe if we can plan that meeting next year to kind of happen organically in that timeline, then it might help alleviate the need to get everyone together kind of in this emergency context to look at these two. That would just be my only suggestion. And I think that's the only major timeline that we work with this board. So I think that would be the only conflict that we had in that schedule.
Well, I would be all in favor of that for sure. Yeah, and an early April meeting would work a lot better for me than a mid to late May meeting or even this meeting. So, yeah.
So
Yeah,
Carrie,
that's-
do the changes we made today go back to the tribal council?
Nope, especially since it was just clarifying language that was already in our regulations. I think, yeah, this, I'll just be able to make these updates and then send this to the state to bring forward tomorrow. If we would have changed any kind of substantial, or made any substantial changes that made, that changed kind of the context of the document, then I would have had to bring that back to council again. Yep. So it is nice to have that little bit of wiggle room. Thankfully today it was just kind of clarifying some of the language in the draft. So
It would have been better if we could have had this meeting earlier though, because it puts a lot of pressure, I think, on Carrie and even Dylan too, in his group to try to get this done in a short order. And I would rather do it in a more deliberate fashion.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess and this is another one where Carrie and I being pretty new here, I'm not sure why then we have this May meeting then if it doesn't even match up the pheasant partridge season. So for sure, we're gonna tweak this calendar moving forward so that we avoid this scramble. So thank you for that heads up, Carrie, and we'll kind of get this calendar updated for next year so that it's reflected in early May or April or whenever, like you said, it would fit best in the process and give everybody ample time to review the regulations and then we can meet. And then, yeah, I'll send out doodle poll for the remainder of this year's meetings. And then as you all see here, as I was explaining to Alan, this is almost, I guess, like a meeting cycle. We switch state and tribal hosting or overseeing management of these meetings every 2 years. And so we are at the halfway point now of the state hosting the board responsibilities. And so February 22nd of 2023 is when we will swap to tribal rep chairmanship. And so one of the appointees from CSKT will then assume responsibilities as a chair and a vice chair. And yeah, so but really appreciate everybody accommodating this sudden rush and on a Monday morning, and really appreciate the dialogue and good questions. And Carrie, thanks. Sorry to put you in a jam here, but thanks for taking it in stride.
no, thank you guys so much. This was super helpful. And yeah, I appreciate your guys' time and ability to kind of meet with us this morning, because that was super helpful. And I'll be able to get these adjusted and then, yeah, given to the state for tomorrow. So thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank
I have
you all.
I have one question, Alan, for
Okay,
Dylan, back to his calendar. I'm just curious, the October meeting, what the final board recommendation refers to.
Let's see your October final board recommendation. I don't know. That's a great question, Dean. That's where I'm gonna have to maybe give Whisper a call, because I think she's, and I guess I haven't told this group either that Jim Williams, our regional supervisor, is retired. Jim retired here a week and a half ago now, and so now with Tom assuming chairmanship and then Jim retiring, we've definitely lost some of that institutional knowledge. So good question, Dean. I'll have to ask around, and I think Whisper would probably know. So I'll circle back to you on that one, circle back to the board with that. So we have clarification on exactly what these agenda items come with. That'd be probably handy.
Hey, Dylan, this is Lee. Would that be tied to any projects that the Fish and Wildlife Service was looking to do and get board approval on, Dean? I don't know.
No, not that I've ever in my tenure yeah, we never bring nothing to the board, or the service never brings anything to the board for, yeah, for anything like that. It's always just updates on projects that have been done. I'm suspecting that was just well, Dylan can probably look on an old calendar, but I'm suspecting that was maybe tied to the April meeting for the regulation changes, since that's the only one I see on there, but I think it just got put on there. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, we'll let Dylan and Carrie and Whisper figure that out for us and get back to us.
You-
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you all. And with that, I've got to jump onto another meeting here.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.